Blackhawks with a spooky Halloween matchup here tonight. Is this a must-win game against the Sharks?
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How we doing, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just a reminder to please go hit the like button, comment down below, and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Thank you very much. I also got to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. If you're not already a member, go and visit FanDuel.com, and you'll have a chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. I hope everyone's Halloween morning is off to a terrific start. Third game of the Blackhawks 5-game road trip goes down here tonight with a spooky 9:30 p.m. Central Time puck drop between two of the finest basement dwellers in the NHL over the last couple of years. Picking up on the Halloween theme that I got going on to kick off today's episode, as the Hawks will be taking on the San Jose Sharks. It's the second meeting between these two teams, of course, this year, with the first coming 2 weeks ago, actually, from this day in the Blackhawks home opener at the United Center on October 17th, leading to a 4-2 win for the Hawks. Very fun to be in attendance to watch them take care of business that night, and that's precisely what they need to do here again this evening. After finally snapping their losing skid against the Colorado Avalanche in their last outing, it's time for the Blackhawks to snowball some momentum back in their direction, because quite honestly, ever since that first win at home against the Sharks, not a lot has gone well for the Blackhawks, but they got a major opportunity here tonight, trying to get back-to-back wins for the first time this year. That's been a problem for this team, really, since Luke Richardson has taken over. Not that it's really his fault necessarily, but would be big for the Hawks to get back-to-back wins. And considering the San Jose Sharks are last in the NHL standings as of right now, however, they have picked up 2 consecutive wins, beating the LA Kings in their most recent outing 4-2. They also beat the Utah Hockey Club 5-4 on Monday, but they are still 2-7-2 through their opening 11 games. They began the year 0-7-2, and considering what we saw in the first matchup between these two teams, where the Sharks really didn't have any answers for the big guns on the Hawks or the man advantage, it would be really nice to see Connor Bedard, Teuvo Teravainen, and the head honchos for this team really go and pick up another handed 2 points here tonight. It's tough to call the 11th game of the season a must-win, but it really feels like it's one of those for the Blackhawks. A chance to get back-to-back wins, get closer to being back to 500. You know, they have a winnable game in Anaheim to close out this road trip after playing Los Angeles on Saturday afternoon. If they can get this one, if they can go and beat Anaheim, it'll be a very successful road trip, and the Blackhawks can hang their heads high when they return to the United Center. It's also just time for them to be beating a team like the San Jose Sharks pretty consistently, which, even though they were another, right there at the bottom of the standings with them last year, the Hawks have won 5 consecutive games over San Jose. Let's go and make it 6 here tonight, because if the Hawks lose this game, quite honestly, I don't know how many people are actually going to be tuning in, considering it starts at 9:30 on Halloween night. There's work tomorrow for a lot of people, but Blackhawks fans are going to be real salty if they're not able to come away with 2 points here tonight against this Sharks team. A couple of other things to note about this Sharks team. Fabian Zetterlund, Tyler Toffoli, some of you may remember those were the 2 Sharks that scored for them in the first meeting between these two teams. Well, not only have they been 2 of the main offensive drivers all year long for San Jose, but they also both scored in the 4-2 win over Los Angeles in their last outing. So those are definitely 2 players that the Blackhawks have to have circled and need to be keeping their eyes on every time they step on the ice. And interestingly enough, Mikael Granlund is the leading scorer for the San Jose Sharks so far this year. 13 points through the team's opening 11 games. So he's someone to keep an eye on, as is Jake Wallman Never thought I'd be saying that statement, and the Detroit Red Wings and Steve Yzerman probably never thought it as well, but what a start to his tenure out with San Jose. 5 points over the last 2 games for Jake Wallman, turning into the new Erik Karlsson over there out on the West Coast. Wink, wink. But those are the guys that us Blackhawks fans and the Blackhawks defensemen, the Jason Dickinson line, I expect them to be going up against for a majority of this game, and the real players to shut down for the Sharks offense. As far as what we could see out of the Blackhawks lineup, per usual, I'm recording this before the morning skate. However, the Hawks did hold a practice yesterday out in San Jose to give us a little bit of an idea of what we could see. As far as the forward group goes, I expect it to be exactly the same as it was in Colorado, meaning Philip Kurashev, Connor Bedard, and Teuvo Teravainen are going to be together for a second consecutive game. That trio really didn't muster up much in their first game together against the Avs. However, I'm not opposed to Luke Richardson rolling them back for another game. One thing I am interested, though, about, it seems like whenever Connor Bedard has had 3 smaller players on his line since he's been here, things just haven't worked well, whether that's been, now Kurashev, Bedard, and Teravainen, Reichel, Bedard, and Teravainen that Richardson tried earlier. It feels like Bedard, maybe because of him being a smaller player, and he's playing with Teravainen, a smaller player as well. Kurashev last year, a smaller player. Those guys don't win a lot of puck battles or board battles. They need someone who can go and do that to get them the puck to create plays. So something to keep in mind as Kurashev, Bedard, and Teravainen are kept together here tonight. Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno, and Tyler Bertuzzi look like they're going to be sticking together, with Nick Foligno playing the center position for a second consecutive game. Probably a tough spot to be putting him in as of right now. Ilya Mikheyev, Jason Dickinson, Ryan Donato were very effective to get those 2 points in the last outing against Colorado. They're going to be together again here tonight, with Pat Maroon, Lucas Reichel, and Craig Smith rounding things out on the fourth line. Andreas Athanasiou and Joey Anderson. The healthy scratch is just tough with the way things have been going. There aren't real clear open spots for them in the lineup, and with neither of them being, big pieces of the future, that's probably going to be the case if this continues moving forward. I do want to mention, though, I think it is too early to go and tinker with that Kurashev, Bedard, Teravainen line. You want to give them a little bit of an opportunity to establish some chemistry together. However, if that doesn't work, the top 6 that I would like to see, if you're going to be having Nick Foligno as the second line center, I think it's time to get Tyler Bertuzzi going, get him up on the top line with Connor Bedard. He can be that guy, as I mentioned, that can go and hound the puck, go and win board battles to get it back to Bedard, to let him and Teravainen, or he and Kurashev in this instance, play with the puck and start cooking in transition and in the offensive zone at the dots with one another. And then on the second line, I'd like to see Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno, and Teuvo Teravainen. That's just personally the top 6 that I would go with if the 2 trios that Richardson is going with tonight doesn't work. But I do expect him to give them a little bit of a larger sample size to establish some chemistry with one another. We did not see the defensive pairings that in the practice of the Blackhawks held yesterday afternoon. However, I think it's pretty obvious what you got to go with at this point in time. Isaac Phillips was recalled from the Rockford Ice Hogs of the AHL, FYI, as Drew Commesso was reassigned. Wyatt Kaiser and Alex Vlasic, I think, kind of need to be stuck with one another, and that's because if you're going to, it needs to either be Kaiser and Jones or Kaiser and Vlasic, because you need to play TJ Brody with one of those two. You need to babysit TJ Brody at this point. And it's unfortunate that this is the start that he's gotten off to in his Blackhawks tenure, but it's pretty apparent that he's just not able to get the job done by himself out there. He kind of needs a true shutdown defender next to him. So I would have TJ Brody with either Seth Jones or Alex Vlasic. That's what it needs to be, and that's what Richardson has been doing for the most part. He's just kind of been mixing things up. The Allen Murphy pairing, I think, has actually been pretty good. They've been working with Kaiser and Murphy from time to time as well. It's still a little bit of a process back there, but until Alec Martinez gets back, this is kind of the situation that the Blackhawks are left with, because Brody, Allen, and Kaiser all have to be in the lineup. Not exactly an ideal situation, and it's going to be real interesting to see what does happen when Alec Martinez is able to return. Unfortunately, we now know that's not going to be until the Blackhawks return to Chicago. Luke Richardson spoke with the Blackhawks media yesterday following practice and said that neither Martinez nor Laurent Brossoit are going to be ready to play during this 3-game road trip. So both of them going to miss at least another 3 games. Tough situation for the Blackhawks D for the reasons that I just mentioned. Martinez kind of just allows everyone to slot down another spot and gives this Blackhawks blue line a little bit more depth. And then Laurent Brossoit, him being out just forces Arvid Soderblom to remain at the NHL level for longer than anyone anticipated. I do believe Peter Mrazek is going to get the start here tonight. Even though he's gone in the last couple of games, I think the Blackhawks are in a position where they got to ride the hot hand in a game where they really need 2 points here tonight. And then with a back-to-back coming up over the weekend, I would anticipate Mrazek goes again on Saturday in Los Angeles, but I wouldn't be surprised to see, Soderblom get the first start there, even though Sunday against the Ducks is the easier of the matchups. At some point, I think they want to give Peter Mrazek a little bit of a breather, but I don't expect that to start here tonight. It's a possibility Soderblom gets in. I'm expecting Peter Mrazek, but definitely a bit of a tough update for the Blackhawks as they won't have Alec Martinez nor Laurent Brossoit for the rest of this 5-game road trip. All right, there is the Blackhawks projected lineup on Halloween night against the San Jose Sharks. Credit to anyone who's going to be staying up late to watch these two basement dwellers battle with one another. Coming up in just a moment, I'll lay out my 3 keys to victory for the Hawks as well as my best bet out in San Jose. But first, I need to talk to you all real quick about Game Time. Hockey season is officially underway, and it's been so good to get back down to the United Center to hear Chelsea Dagger, grab a cold beverage, and enjoying the atmosphere at the Madhouse. And I know many of my listeners and viewers of today's episode who are hearing this right now or watching this right now feel the exact same way that I did going into the start of the year. Super antsy to get back down to the UC, and that's why I'm here to talk to you all about Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, which makes it even easier to get tickets to not only hockey events, but your favorite live events in general. It makes it even easier. And I personally have been using Game Time for probably 10 years now at this point. Whether I am going to the UC to watch the Blackhawks, going to the Cubs down at Wrigley Field, or traveling to another sporting event in any city, I always check Game Time first whenever I need to purchase a ticket because it's the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way to purchase any ticket. Plus, they provide last-minute tickets, flash deals, and zone deals that make it so easy to find and buy tickets now that hockey season has officially taken over. So I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app right now, and when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off to the sporting events, concerts, or theater events near you. Yes, you can come and get $20 off to see Bedard at the United Center this year. All you got to do, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed, Game Time. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Did want to say thank you real quick to everyone who made Locked On Blackhawks their very first listen to start off their day. Now for your second listen, make sure, definitely just spit a little bit there on my laptop. Apologies for anyone who had to see that. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast because you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find Locked On Fantasy Hockey down in the description or search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2, laying out my 3 keys to victory as I always do for the Blackhawks ahead of every matchup for the entirety of the regular season. And of course, be on the lookout for my game recap that I will be dropping tomorrow morning. Another reason for you all to go and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates, game previews, and game recaps. My first key to victory for the Blackhawks here tonight is to sustain long shifts in the offensive zone. I thought That was a huge key of theirs. In the first meeting between these two teams, the Blackhawks were down on the other end of the ice for the entire game, it felt like, up until, San Jose had their goaltender pulled down to in the final minutes, right? Like, it felt like the Sharks never really threatened Chicago, and that's because they were just sustaining offensive zone shifts. They had a ton of power play time, and I really think that strategy is going to work even more so to their favor here tonight because the San Jose Sharks, this is their fourth game in their past 6 days. They're on a little bit of tired legs here, and for the Blackhawks, even though there has been some travel involved here on this road trip, this is only their second game in the last 5 days. So I believe the Blackhawks are the fresher team. They're the team who should have the fresher legs in the final half of this game. The more sustained offensive zone time that they can have, that's only going to tire out the San Jose Sharks even more. So sustained offensive zone time, long shifts, cycling the puck well in the offensive zone, going to pay dividends in a lot of different ways for the Blackhawks here tonight. My second key to victory is for Bedard and Tavo to take over the game. They were capable of that in the first meeting between these two teams. The Sharks had absolutely no answer, and I think it's on both of those two guys as the primary drivers for the Hawks' top power play unit. The man advantage did convert in the win over Colorado. However, it was the second unit who cashed in for what I think actually might be that unit's first goal of the season. And this top unit has been a little cold in terms of getting the finished product in these last few games. Bedard and Tavo, the two guys at the dots, the two guys who play with the puck mostly on the power play and are the key drivers of this Blackhawks offense. They got to take over this game. If they do that, if they have multi-point performances like each of them did in the last meeting, 2 assists for both players, Blackhawks are coming away with 2 points here tonight. My third key to victory is to shut down the Sharks' top 6. If you do that, you probably win the game because Granlund, Toffoli, Zetterlund, really, those are the guys who have done like 60% of the offensive work for San Jose this year. If you're able to keep them off the scoreboard, Jason Dickinson, that's the line he, Mikheyev, and Donato are going to be going up against. Alex Vlasic, Seth Jones, they're going to be facing those guys a lot here tonight. If they're able to shut them down, hold them off the stat sheet, the Blackhawks are going to get 2 points here tonight because I just don't think the Sharks have enough firepower, even though the Blackhawks don't have a lot themselves. If you hold that top line, off the board, I don't think they have enough firepower to keep up with the Blackhawks. So there are my 3 keys to victory for the Blackhawks here tonight. As far as the best bet, courtesy of the fine folks over at FanDuel. Looking at the lines here as of right now, it is 8:30 in the morning at the time of this recording. So unfortunately, what happens to be the case when I record these episodes early on in the morning, the point scores for player props aren't out right now, putting me in a little bit of a tough situation. The lines at this point in time, though, the Blackhawks are minus 138 on the money line, with the Sharks at plus 115. Minus 1.5 for the Blackhawks is plus 176, which I think is a pretty darn good number. Plus 1.5 in San Jose's direction is minus 220. Over 6.5 is plus 112, while under 6.5 is minus 140. And as I referenced earlier, the Blackhawks have won each of the last 5 meetings against the Sharks and 9 of the last 14 over the past 4 years. So, gotta get 2 points here tonight against a team they are better than. Let's just call a spade a spade. Maybe it's not by a huge margin, but they are better than the San Jose Sharks team, even though they're the 2 teams at the bottom of the Western Conference standings right now. As far as the over-under, not much of a lean here, as over 6.5 has hit in 7 of the last 14 matchups, while under 6.5 has also, of course, hit in 7 of the last 14. As far as the goal scorers go, Bedard is the favorite at plus 170, Toffoli at plus 180, Teravainen plus 220, Bertuzzi plus 240, Zetterlund plus 240, Foligno and Granlund at plus 270, so is William Eklund, while Taylor Hall is at plus 280 and Philip Kurashev is at plus 320. Quite honestly, I have 2 plays tonight, and they're both individual bets, and I think one of them is going to win. I'm taking Ryan Donato to get a revenge goal against his former team, the San Jose Sharks. I'm someone who firmly believes in those revenge games, especially against the Blackhawks. I mean, because it seemingly always happens. And that means you probably should bet on Jan Ruda to get a point here this evening. However, I can't bet that because it's not listed right now on FanDuel. I'm sure it will be before the puck drops. But I got Ryan Donato plus 430 to keep the mojo going and to score a goal here tonight against his former team. I also like the Blackhawks minus 1.5 at plus 176. I know they're on the road. I know the Sharks have won 2 in a row. I think the Blackhawks are going to take it to them. I just don't think San Jose has the blue line to have answers for Connor Bedard and Teuvo Teravainen. I think if the Hawks can draw a lot of penalties like they did last time, the man advantage is going to be able to cook out there. So 2 individual bullet plays from yours truly here today. Ryan Donato, anytime goal scorer, plus 430. Obviously more unlikely, but I think the Blackhawks minus 1.5 at plus 176 is a really good number. So there are my 2 plays for Halloween tonight with the Blackhawks on the West Coast. And there's everything you need to know before the 9:30 p.m. Central Time puck drop against San Jose. Don't go anywhere, though, Blackhawks fans, because coming up in just a moment, I still have to touch on the latest trade rumors regarding Hawks defenseman Connor Murphy. Wrong one. But first, I need to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, which is FanDuel. Because right now, new customers, can bet $5 and get $150 worth of bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And how about our Blackhawks? Big time 5-2 win over the Colorado Avalanche in their last time out. Can they keep the momentum going here tonight against the Sharks? If you want to hammer the Hawks on the money line or tail me with them minus 1.5 on the puck line at plus 176, be sure to go and visit FanDuel.com. And if you're not already a member, create an account and you can win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Again, that's FanDuel.com. And if your first $5 bet wins, FanDuel will bless you with $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. So never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Segment 3, during yesterday's segment 3, actually, I broke down if the Blackhawks were to make a trade for a young second-line center, which to me seems pretty far-fetched at this point in time. There's just a lot of complications that go into making a deal this early on in the season, but I did go over a couple of possible trade targets if Kyle Davidson were able to get something done, just so that way there wouldn't be a surprise. However, I really don't think the Blackhawks are going to be able to get a trade done this early on in the season, at least to bring in a second-line center who I think fits the criteria, and that's the biggest thing. They need someone who fits that criteria because they do have center depth and lots of different reasons. If you want to hear more of my thoughts and hear the names that I mentioned could be in the mix for the Blackhawks potentially, be sure to go and check out yesterday's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. But funny enough, as I was recording that, actually, there are more Blackhawks rumors that would have came out involving defenseman Connor Murphy, as Elliot Friedman was talking about a potential fix to the Edmonton Oilers blue line, as for a second consecutive year, they've gotten off to a rather slow start. And here's what he had to say, name dropping Connor Murphy. Quote, a guy who I think people would take a look at and think, does this make sense at all, would be a guy like Connor Murphy. Last year, there were a lot of teams that were interested in Murphy. And, close quote, by the way. Murphy is someone who I've kind of speculated in trade rumors over these last couple of years, but because of his deal, I think it's been more so of a long shot up until this point. And while there is only 1 year left on his current deal, which could make a trade a little bit more feasible, he does have a $4.4 million cap hit, which for a guy who's probably at best number 4 defenseman on a really good team, but more than likely a third pairing guy, right? That's a high price tag to pay for not only this year, but next season as well. And I think the tougher thing about trading Connor Murphy, even though he might be someone that other teams are looking at, teams looking to add a right-handed defenseman to their blue line. I think the Blackhawks situation on D, even though there is a little bit of a logjam and they're going to have to open things up down the road because of the situation right now, I don't know if they'd be willing to trade Connor Murphy with Alec Martinez being banged up. And quite honestly, Alec Martinez is probably only going to be here until the trade deadline. Even if the Blackhawks are only able to get a third or a fourth or whatever for him, they're probably still going to do it because they want that asset. But with Martinez being banged up and with TJ Brody getting off to a disastrous start to his Blackhawks tenure, I really don't know if the Hawks can afford to trade Connor Murphy, right? Like, can they? I don't know. Those are big minutes that they'd be missing on the back end. And we saw when Connor Murphy was out last year due to injury, how that negatively affected the development of Kevin Korchinski, right? He was stuck playing with Jacob Megna for a majority of the second half. And we don't want that to be happening to Wyatt Kaiser or Nolan Allen if they are up at the NHL level. We want them playing with responsible veteran guys. So for those reasons, I think it makes a Connor Murphy trade a little bit difficult. It feels like the Blackhawks, even though, again, they have some guys in the minors that they probably could call up to fill that gap, they still want their youngsters to be in a good spot. And trading Murphy at this point in time, I don't know if that necessarily gives them that. I do think it's, probably something that's going to happen. I don't think Murphy is going to play out his entire contract here in Chicago, even though he is the longest tenured Blackhawk and a guy who wears the A and a respected veteran in that locker room. I think eventually they're going to have to open up that gap. But again, trading him and leaving TJ Brody potentially on his offside with Seth being the only other right-handed defenseman in the organization outside of Louis Crevier, that just puts the Blackhawks in a really peculiar spot. So whether it's for a second-line center or whether it's trading Connor Murphy, I just don't expect the Blackhawks to be involved in trades this early on in the season. It would be a big-time surprise to me if the Blackhawks wound up getting a trade done for either situation. But that's just my 2 cents. I think it's too small of a sample size. I think there's too many complications involved in either deal. But if there are more rumors, I'll be sure to talk about them right here on Locked On Blackhawks. But that's going to wrap up today's episode. Thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcasts, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and find me on X at Jack Bushman2. Can go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. So until the next episode, everyone, go Hawks. Happy Halloween. Enjoy your Halloween night. Stay safe. And I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.